Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and since all of you, or a lot of you, seem to have enjoyed my most recent video where I ranted about a book and said some of you were interested in hearing me talk about some books, I'm just gonna tell you about all the books I've read so far this year. So yeah, let's rank some books. We're gonna jump straight into it. I haven't read that many books yet, so I don't know how long this is going to be, but I've had like talking about some books. So the ranking system is going to be four tiers. There's going to be Don't Bother, which is to be taken quite literally. Don't bother. I hated reading this. There's was disappointing. Where I was like, I was kind of ready to like this, but it disappointed me. Then I like it, which was basically just means was entertaining, not great, not bad, but I like reading it. And one of the best, which means this is one of the best books I've either read this year or ever. So yeah, that's the tier ranking system. I'm gonna structure this. I'm gonna start with all the English novels I've read. So because I read books in English and in German since I live in Germany. So I'm going to talk about all the English books I've read so far, which is going to be most of them. Then I'm going to talk about some books I've read in German. And at the end, I'm also going to mention some manga and graphic novels and comic books that I've read. So let's jump into it. The first book which I finished this year was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I was so excited to finally read this because it was sold out everywhere. And then I finally got it at the bookshop. I was like, yes, so excited to jump into this. I read this just in like 3 days or something, which for me is quite fast. I think everyone's heard of this by now. This is an autobiography by Jeanette McCurdy, who probably most of you will know as Sam Puckett from iCarly. And Jeanette writes about her experiences as a child actress and especially her struggle with her mum, as you can tell from the title of this book. She had a very complicated, toxic relationship with her mother, and she talks about her life growing up, what it was like being a child actress, child star, that she didn't really enjoy acting that much, but she wasn't really allowed to express her true passions because of her mum. There's some quite heavy stuff in here, obviously, so do take care if you read this. There's going to be stuff in there like, toxic parent relationships. There's also talk about eating disorder and depression and stuff like that. So yeah, do take care if you read this. But this was definitely a very, very good book. I've given this book on my Goodreads 5 out of 5. So I don't really read biographies that often, but this one really interested me, and it's so well written. You can really tell that Jeanette McCurdy is really passionate about writing. It has just the right amount of humor. It's sort of like a bit dry and dark, but it also dives enough into her feelings of what she was going through at the time, with the retrospect of what she's like now and how she looks back on those events now. And it was so entertainingly written that, like I said, I read this quite fast. And even if you're normally not a biography reader, definitely pick this up. This was really good. The next book I finished, I don't even want to talk about for that long, because it was Harry Potter. It was The Prisoner of Azkaban, because I've been going on like a rereading trip for... I'm at the third book, and I started this reread journey like 2 years ago or something. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about, because, we don't want to acknowledge J.K. Rowling. I just started sort of like a reread as, out of fun, and because I was like, let's look back at these novels now, and because they feel a bit different now. But yeah, Prisoner of Azkaban is still my favorite book in the series, and I had fun with it. I don't want to go too much into it. If you want to hear my opinions on like the first and second book, I also wrote like a little review on my Goodreads for those. So yeah, Prisoner of Azkaban done. I sort of started reading Goblet of Fire a couple of months ago. Only read like the first 2 or 3 chapters. We'll see how the rereading journey will go, but let's move on. Let's not talk about J.K. Rowling. The next book I finished was by Andrew Joseph White, Hell Followed With Us. This cover looks bloody amazing. This is why I was originally drawn to this book when I saw it at the bookshop, because look at this. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. So this is a post-apocalypse horror book with sci-fi elements. I picked this up because it has a trans man protagonist, or trans boy. I think the protagonist is like 16 years old or something. And he escapes from a cult which has been set up after, a virus has unleashed on Earth and destroyed basically all of society. And he escapes this cult where he has been chosen to be like sort of like an angelic chosen one, but naturally they don't really accept his true identity and still dead name him and see him as a girl, and he's trying to get away from that, and he gets picked up by sort of a youth group, by an LGBTQ youth group, sort of like a rebellion group. They pick him up, and then he sort of lives with them, and he goes on adventures with them, sort of, while at the same time he has to fight with this virus that he has been injected with by the cult, as he slowly transforms into like this sort of an angelic looking chosen one monster. I was really excited to read this because I thought a post-apocalyptic horror book with a trans protagonist, sign me the hell up. Thing is, it's kind of disappointing. So I think this is the author's debut novel, and you can really tell because the premise is really interesting. The setting also really cool, quite creative. I really like all the like horror-esque transformational stuff that's going on with the main character. But everything else sort of really lags. There isn't like the story really like, sort of comes to a halt. Nothing interesting really happens throughout the whole novel. The novel like so sort of the main character hanging out with like these other teens. They talk. Nothing really happens. Then quick! Suddenly quick! We're gonna do some quick plot shit, and then we're gonna back to talking, and nothing happens. You're like, okay. It was just kind of boring. To be honest, there is a love story in this as well, almost like a love triangle. So there is like a character, he falls in love with who is the leader of the youth group, but at the same time the main character is also still attached to their to his fiance from the cult group. So there's also like sort of a bit of a toxic relationship still going on there. And it didn't really work that well for me. I didn't really buy into the love story. Also, we occasionally like shift viewpoints to the other two boys, to the two love interests, but it happened so infrequently that I always forgot that these two are also main characters, and it felt it didn't really work for me. Like, a premise great, representation is great. Like, there are so many different queer identities in this. I think this is the first novel I've read that has a character using neo-pronouns. But the problem is that some of those characters, or most of these characters, are just there to represent a certain queer identity. And that's it. Like, their identity is, I am this and this in the LGBTQ acronym. And that's sort of it. Yeah, great that all of these people are in there, but, there's more to a character than just being queer. That's also one of the main problems I have with the main character, because I get that you're trans and it's really important to you, but it was literally mentioned in every single chapter. It had to be pointed out every single chapter, every like 3 pages. He had to talk about him being trans and how it related to what was happening around him. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I get this is important for you, but it was kind of annoying at certain points, and I don't know. I get that you could maybe you're more into this if you're maybe a bit of a younger reader. I don't know. Again, representation was great, and for a debut novel, you could definitely do worse. This is still okay, I think. I was just a bit disappointed because premise and idea cool, execution not that much. The next book I read, I think also has been talked about quite a lot, namely Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I was really excited about this book as well, because this is a book all about gaming. And I do love me a good video game. So this book tells the story of two friends and their friendship and working journey within the gaming industry. So we meet these characters when they become friends at first, when they're small, they meet at the hospital. Then they then we see how they grow up into students, how they come into touch with the gaming world, and then how they eventually reunite and start a game developing company. And there is no like major like overall plot line that goes through like the whole novel. This is really just about moments and the journey of these two characters and their friendship. But I think it was still really, really interesting to read, especially since the gaming industry is, I think, an industry that we don't really see that often portrayed in novels. And as someone who likes video games, of course, I had pre-existing interest. Sure, you could argue that you maybe need to have some pre-existing knowledge or pre-existing interest in the gaming world to enjoy this book, but I still think if you're willing to like be open about the topic of gaming, you can still find this interesting. This is mainly focused about friendship. I love that this is not a romance at all. The two characters do not fall in love by the end of this book, and it's all about the ups and downs of their friendship. Some stuff, like some plot beats, are repeated here and there, which made me think that maybe you could have edited out some stuff. But overall, I think this still flows really nicely. The characters are both very likable, but still flawed. I know there's a lot of like discourse going on as to like, you know, who's kind of more fucked up as a friend, I guess. But I still think this was a very interesting, very entertaining to read. It's just like a really sweet and dramatic and honest depiction of a friendship as it just happens in real life. Also some content warning maybe for this one. There's also like some toxic relationship stuff, abuse, death of family members, also talks about gun violence. So yeah, do be prepared to meet themes like that in this book. But overall, I think this is a really great contemporary novel, especially for like sort of the nerds and the geeks and the video game fans. And I really like this one, and I think I would say it's one of the best ones I've read so far this year. The next book I read was Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas, a YA fantasy novel. Me reading a YA fantasy novel, and it was actually enjoyable. I am shocked too. So this, similar to Hell Followed With Us, I picked up because it has a trans-masculine main character, and unlike Hell Followed With Us, I actually like this one. Not great, but still enjoyable. I think I gave it like a 3.5 or something. This is about a trans-masculine boy who grows up in, it says in the Latinx community, and his family are part of the, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, about the brood, what is it called? I'm sorry, the Broodrings, I think. I never know how to pronounce it. It's about these Latinx people who deal with dead people. The family lives on a graveyard, and they deal all with like the ghost appearances. They help people move on into the afterlife, or not. They just hang out with ghosts at times as well. And our main character is trying to find his place in this society, which is very conservative and very like stereotypically gender based. And of course, most people around him are like, we don't really think you can be, you know, part of the, you know, like the male part of this society that we have. But of course, he proves them different. And we have a love story here going on as well. There is a ghost. The main character and his best friend, they find a ghost who is the ghost of the local bad boy. The local bad boy at school has died. They find this ghost, and the ghost and our protagonist fall in love. And I just think if you hear, ghost love story, why wouldn't you be like, nice, let's read that. Like I said, it's YA. The characters are like 16 years old, I think, as well in this one. It for me personally, I know I'm not the target audience for this. For me, it felt like, sure, a bit, a bit cheesy and too cutesy at times. But YA and YA romances especially just be like that at times. But it was never like annoying. I could understand why these characters fell in love, even though I would have liked some more detailed like depiction of them just hanging out together, exploring their feelings. I really like the cultural background that's going on with like the Bruges and how they deal with these supernatural appearances, and it's all about also like Day of the Dead is also like a huge topic in this. And I thought it was really, really interesting. I thought it had a really good premise that you don't see that often, and not a great novel, but I liked it, and I think it's especially great if you're like looking for something a bit more softer, and especially something that has like LGBTQ plus representation. And I think I even read this during Pride Month, so this was really fitting, and yeah, I liked it. Speaking of Pride Month, another book I was really excited about that came out, I think also in June, Page Boy by Elliot Page, and I'm low-key scared to talk about this because it was sort of a disappointment to me. The thing is, I was really, really excited to read this because I love Elliot Page. I'm a huge fan of his work. And with this book, I thought, great, we're finally gonna get like a really interesting, intricate biography about what it means to be a trans man. And color me surprised and disappointed when I read this book, and I sort of thought it's not really that. Of course, it's kind of hard to like really rate a biography, and I by no means want to say that anything that Elliot Page talks about in this book, everything that happened in this book that he talks about are all valid experiences. I don't want to say, how dare you talk about this? Of course not. This is his story. He chooses the story he wants to tell. And all of his experiences and feelings that he describes in his books are absolutely valid. I was just kind of disappointed with how he decided to present the story of his life. Because, first off, there is no discernible like timeline or theming by which these chapters are assembled. Not story, but the narrative jumps around a lot in the timeline. Up until the very end, I had to do double takes because I wasn't sure in which year we were in Elliot's life. I just wasn't clear. It helped whenever he like mentioned certain projects, movies or TV shows that he was working on at the time, so I could look them up and was like, okay, so it's during this year. That helped, but it was really confusing at times. You don't have to necessarily do a biography in like a chronological way. You can also just like assemble the chapters by theme or topic, but the book didn't even do that, so that was kind of confusing already. And then the thing is, if you like me really wanted a book about what it means to be trans nowadays, especially what it means to be a trans man, this book is sort of not really about that, because for a large part of this novel, Elliot Page talks about what it meant at the time to be, at the time, a closeted lesbian in Hollywood. That's what this book is mostly about. Which, is still a valid experience. I'm just saying, I expected more talk about, how he discovered that he was trans and what that meant to him, and how he reflects on certain experiences in regards to gender now, looking back at some of those events that he talks about in this. But that comes up not a lot. The most focus, like the sort of like transgender part of the story gets, is during the last like 30 pages of the book, and then it's mostly just like him getting surgery and feeling better, and that's sort of it. The book, in my opinion, personally, didn't reflect enough on like how did he actually come to realize that he's trans, what are his thoughts on that now, how does he look back on certain events now. There's not really a whole lot of, you know, retrospective in this book, because he talks about a lot of different events, but then never really reflects on those events. Sure, it occasionally happens, but only like sort of surface level, in my opinion. And I really wanted him to go more into detail. Again, of course, all of those events are valid, and he chooses which story he tells about his own life. Of course, that's his choice. It's his biography. It's just, to me, as, you know, if you advertise your book as, you know, a biography by arguably the most famous trans man in the world right now, about what it means to be a trans man, and the book is not really about that, then I'm kind of disappointed. It was still interesting to read, and I think a lot of people will recognize themselves in this book, and they will love this book, and I don't want to take that away from you. Books like this are important. This is a really important book. We need more books like this. It's just that, to me personally, as a biography, as it was written, it fell flat for me, and I think I gave it like a 2.5 as a rating. Like, it's not bad, it's not horrible. Maybe I was just too hyped, but yeah, in the end, it was sort of a disappointment, but still an important book. Next book I read, Fourth Wing. Not gonna say anything about that. I literally did a whole 3-hour analysis / rant about why I did not like that book. Let me just say, I do not get why everyone loves this. That's all I'm gonna say. Overhyped, definitely. Does not deserve 4.67 rating on Goodreads. And if you want to know why I think that, you can just watch the video where I talk about it for 3 hours. Let's just move on. The next book I read is actually right behind me. It's the purple one. I read The Nine Eyes of Lucian, which is, I think, the second Critical Role novel. You can see the first one right there. Kith and Kin was like the first, I think, Critical Role novel, and I didn't like Kith and Kin very much, so I was kind of nervous to get into Nine Eyes of Lucian, because I just started this book thinking, please be better than Kith and Kin, just please be better than that, and thank God it was. Was it great? No, but it was at least enjoyable. Kith and Kin, I did not like at all. It bored the hell out of me. Nine Eyes of Lucian is at least interesting and entertaining. Mind you, I think you really need to be into Critical Role and the Mighty Nine and Lucian as a character in order to like really get into this book. You really do need some pre-existing knowledge. It helps that, you know, the first half of the novel is like stuff we haven't known yet. It's about Lucian's past, how he grew up, how he met some of his friends. And then the second half of the novel is just, you know, events we've known from the Critical Role podcast, just told from Lucian's point of view. It was interesting because they play around a lot with, you know, the different, you know, the madness in his head, the different voices that he hears throughout, how he changes, how he becomes how he becomes a sort of supernatural identity. They play around with that a lot. I think it's depicted really well, especially in written form. They do it with like different fonts, which I think work really well. We also get a bit more Molly content, which I think is always nice. So yeah, I think if, like me, similar to me, you were sort of disappointed by Kith and Kin and weren't sure if you want to pick up this one, I think it's worth a shot. Don't get excited too much, but I think it was nevertheless worth a read. So yeah, if you're a fan of Critical Role, I would say definitely pick this up. And this brings us to the most recent book I have finished a couple of days ago, namely by Travis Baldree, Legends and Lattes, because I was on a D&D vibe journey. Because of this one, you know the one, and I had this on my book and I was like, now it's time to read. This is a really, really cozy, cute D&D fantasy adjacent novel. This is about an orc barbarian. She's been adventuring for quite a while, but she decides, I want to do something different now. It's time to hang up the sword. I'm gonna open up a coffee shop. And that's the book. It's just really cozy coffee shop vibes about this barbarian orc lady who together with a succubus girl, builds this coffee shop along with the help of other people, and how their business goes, what kind of coffee they come up with, the baking goods, building furniture, all that. It's not very exciting. It doesn't have like a thrilling overarching story. It just is kind of, I don't want to say boring, but not a lot of stuff happened, and it's just cozy. It's all about the cozy vibes. Like, don't expect when you pick this novel up that you're gonna get like a really intrinsic, detailed, thrilling story. No, this is just fantasy characters coming up with the idea of a coffee shop in a fantasy setting. That's kind of it. I wish we would have had some more actual fantastical fantasy elements, but I still think for what we got, this was really, really cozy. This was absolutely adorable. This made me go, "Aw," like several times. We have a love story between the two main women in this book. And this is just a really good, cozy, like in-between, chill read. If you maybe also like a bit of reading something, you don't know what to do, pick up this book. It's really cozy, it's cute. Maybe one of the best I've read this year, I'm not sure. I gave it like a 4, I think. But I definitely enjoyed it very, very much. So if you're on the lookout for something cozy, like fantasy, but not too fantasy heavy, definitely pick this up. Okay, and as I've mentioned earlier, I have read a couple of German books since, I live in Germany. This is where I've studied, so I occasionally also read books in German. I don't actually know if some of these have English translations, but maybe they will get some, so I'm just going to talk about them. The first one is this one, which I don't think has an English translation. It can be translated as like Monsters on the Couch. This is about fictional characters from Victorian literature being therapized. So this is presented as multiple therapy sessions, like scripted therapy sessions, where famous Victorian characters such as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein and his monster, and a couple of others, Dorian Gray, go and get some therapy. It's present day. They go and see a therapist lady, and that's the book. Multiple therapy sessions. There isn't really like any narration. It's all dialogue. It's all like script writing. Occasionally you get diary entries from the therapist. And I thought this was really cute. I picked this up just because I thought this idea is like right up my alley, because I love Victorian literature, and I thought this is kind of silly little idea that I would come up with. So I read this. It wasn't by any means like really spectacular. It was just really cute in between stuff, with characters I already knew from the books, and I thought we're gonna get like some sort of like character analysis. I wish the book had kind of went a bit more into like the character analyses bit. This mostly just functions as, sort of retellings of the individual character stories and what their thoughts were. So this was by no means like really anything new, but I thought it was still cute. Second German book I've read was by Stefan Zweig, who is a pretty well-known German author. And I think it is called Confusion in English, and it's, lo and behold, actually sort of a gay novel, written in the early 20th century. Yeah, it's a very short novel. I think it was like 100 pages in this like volume I have, and it's about a young student and his relationship to his older professor. How they got to know each other, how they become friends, and slowly but steadily develop like this really deep bond for one another, which eventually also culminates into homoerotic feelings. And I was kind of surprised by that, because I thought, the author's just going to go on about, they were really good friends and they had a really deep bond, but it's not gay. But no, it actually is. I think there is a kiss between the two men towards the end of the book. So I don't know if you're interested in like some early queer fiction by a German author, I guess pick up Confusion. Most recent German book I've read definitely has no English translation because I think this book is only came out like a couple of months ago. It was a gothic novel, which can be translated as The Portrait of Ashton Manor. It's a gothic novel by an author. She, I think, also studied English literature, so she knows her stuff. And this is basically, this feels like, Edgar Allan Poe over-portrait meets Dorian Gray. That is kind of what this book is. It's about a young man in the late 19th century whose sister has gone missing when he was a child, and he has this old grandpa who knows that some weird stuff is going on at the manor. And they have this weird, gigantic ass painting of a young man in their I don't know, in a hall at the manor. And of course, there's some like mystery stuff surrounding the portrait. Surprisingly enough, I don't want to spoil too much. There was a queer relationship in this, mind you. It's a toxic one, but it was still surprising in a good way, sort of, because I just did not expect that to happen here. So maybe for my fellow readers who are able to read German books, if you see this, worth picking up. It's not very long, and if like me, you're a fan, of like gothic-y Victorian vibes, I think this is worth checking out. By no means anything like spectacularly good, but I thought it was still entertaining and like a good in-between short read. Okay, now at the end, let's quickly talk about some manga and comic books I've read. The first manga I've read this year was, I think, volume 6 of Black or White. This is a yaoi series about two actors, one of whom is like sort of a newish actor, the other one is known for playing like bad boy characters, and they have a secret relationship with one another. The filming industry, of course, is not supposed to know, because they're worried that, the industry is not going to be very accepting of this. This was the 6th volume. Was okay. It's a series I enjoy reading because I like the premise, two actors, because I'm into theater and acting, so I was like, okay, this is cute, this is interesting. It's also, of course, kind of spicy in some scenes, so if you do want to pick this up, there is spicy stuff in there. It's interesting. I like seeing how the story progresses, so yeah, I had fun with that. Next up is a short manga series called Not a Boy. This is about two girls who start a relationship, but the twist is one of the girls thinks the other one, her partner, is actually a boy. Because, it's a very tomboyish girl who starts a relationship with another girl who thinks that she's a boy. It's very sweet. It's such a cute, sweet story. Sure, it feels a bit convoluted at times because you're like, just tell her you're a girl. But it is really cute. Sure, it plays around with some tropes, and sort of as the story goes on, there, especially when the reveal is sort of built up to, there's a bit of like sort of stereotypical gender thinking a bit. But nevertheless, I thought this was really sweet and a good, like really good short queer manga series that I enjoyed reading. Next up, I read two DC comic books in the One Bad Day series, namely I read the one for the Riddler and I read the one for the Penguin. So these are two stories inspired by The Killing Joke. All it takes is one bad day to go crazy, that famous line from The Killing Joke, and they applied to other Batman villains. So I picked these two up because the Riddler and the Penguin are arguably, well, especially the Riddler, my two favorite Batman villains who are not the Joker. So I picked these up, and the Penguin I enjoyed slightly less, because to me it didn't really have that feeling of it is one bad day and the Penguin cracks, or that's why he becomes a villain or something, because I don't think the graphic novel was really like that or about that. I mean, it was still an interesting story with how the Penguin sort of regains power in Gotham. Sort of like he's been broken down, he's been beaten, and now he like tries to rebuild his empire. That's sort of what that story is. And yeah, I mean, it was interesting. But I thought there would be a bit more, especially considering the one bad day premise. I did enjoy the Riddler one. This one was really interesting, surprisingly violent and brutal. We really see like what Enigma's childhood was like, which was of course really shit. And basically we see how terrible the Riddler can be if he stops all his gimmicks. So there is basically this sort of like underlying idea in this graphic novel how the Riddler suddenly starts killing without doing like his usual riddles and clues. He's just like really unhinged now. And the Riddler, if he sort of gives up his shtick and just shows what he can actually do, is portrayed in this to be really utterly terrifying. And I love that. That was so interesting. Especially since that also really put in the forefront, you know, the Riddler's intelligence and manipulation skills, also what his sort of like mini role was in A Killing Joke, which was interesting. So yeah, I was really satisfied with this story, especially because I was worried because, you know, the Riddler is, if we leave the joke out, the Riddler is like my favorite Batman villain, so I really wanted this to be interesting, and it was. So yeah, I'm glad I read both of these. I really want to read some of the other ones in the One Bad Day series, although I really enjoyed them with the Riddler sort of standing out for me here. And lastly, I have to mention that I'm finally getting back into reading One Piece. I read volume 92. I know I'm really, really far behind. I was like a couple of months ago, I was like really into it. I was like, okay, cool. I'm really into it. I'm finally getting up to date with the rest of the world. And then life happened, and I stopped, or I had to stop. And now I'm sort of trying to jump back into it. And I read volume 92. So this is like sort of the first. This is like sort of still the beginning of the Wano arc. First act's over. We've already met Kaido. Like Luffy's already had a first clash with him. We've seen that Kaido can become a dragon. Big Mama has just like reappeared now. Apparently she's lost her memory or her mind. I don't know. We'll see where that goes. I'm still trying to sort of find my footing with the storyline. It still feels a bit all over the place for me, but I think there's some interesting setup being done in that volume with like at this point in the story, like Luffy is in a jail with Kid, which I think is really interesting because I like Kid, and now I'm assuming these two have to like sort of team up to get out of the prison. And the other characters are doing like sort of stuff on the side. Though I have to mention, why is it that out of all the Straw Hats, we see literally every Straw Hat in this volume, at least for a couple of pages, except one, Brooke? Why do I never get to see my favorite character? Why is my favorite character always the one that is left out? I think it's unfair. The thing is, if there's an explanation for why he's not there, I do not remember it, so that's maybe on me, because it's been literal months since I've read volume 91, and I'm only now getting back into the story. But yeah, where was Brooke? I need my skeleton man. But yeah, there's some fun stuff in there. I'm still sort of like I said, trying to get my footing in regards to like the story, what's happening. But I'm just excited to like sort of getting back into One Piece and hopefully catching up with everyone soon. Yeah, that's it for all the books I've read so far this year. Just showing you real quick what I'm currently reading. I'm currently reading, together with my girlfriend actually, Sorcery of Thorns, which I think is a quite popular, I think, standalone fantasy book. I'm only like not even 100 pages in. I'm on page 73. I'm still kind of like trying to get into it, but I do like the premise. It's all about, you know, like cursed books and evil sorcerers. There's some good stuff going on here, and I literally start that today because, you know, Oppenheimer. So I got the book the movie's based on, like this really well-renowned biography. I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. I think it's going to be really interesting. So yeah, that is what I'm currently reading and have read throughout the year. Thank you so much for watching this. Please do tell me down in the comments below what you've read this year. Did you already have some like reading highlights or like some reading flops this year? Please do tell me down in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you have any thoughts and opinions on the books I have talked about here, also tell me about your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. And I'll see all of you very soon.